Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I am a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. The journey continues today on December 11th, 2021 at approximately 10:05 a.m. PST. Last night was a little rough. Okay, nightmares left, right, and center. And understand, when I have nightmares, they are not just little scary bumps under the bed, if you will. Okay, I usually end up with nightmares that really boil down to body counts. And a lot of that is, in all fairness, because of the past lives I remember. Okay, I remember being at things like the Battle of Hastings, like the War of Independence. I remember Pompeii collapsing. I remember Manoa being wiped into the sea. Okay, I remember watching the Egyptians get swallowed by get swallowed by the try that again by the Dead Sea. I think it was the Dead Sea. I still remember them being just absolutely swallowed. I remember the Great Flood that ended up leaving the Ark at the top of Mount Ararat. Okay, these are all things I remember being very involved in. I remember quite clearly the terror that happened during both the War of the Roses and, for that matter, the Scottish Rebellion. Okay, I remember the whole 9 yards. I even remember the fall of Rome during the Great Rebellion. Okay, Boston Tea Party I remember reading about, but I don't actually remember being there. Okay, not that I recall anyway. That may come in time, but the point being, when I have nightmares, I've got body counts. However, this one last night finally dawned on me why people are having so much trouble. Okay, society hasn't learned a lot, but they did learn one thing: how to absolutely focus on the wrong thing. Now, it dawned on me how to explain it because I'm looking at this whole COVID thing. I'm going, why is it so difficult to work? I remember the bubonic plague. During the bubonic plague, the Black Plague, okay, I was a coroner at the time. I happened to be one of 4 coroners when it hit. 2 of us turned out to be immune to it. Needless to say, we made a staggering amount of money. Okay, so it didn't bother us too much. But when that happened, okay, the people, we realized something very quickly, and even the king at the time realized that you can't legislate health. You cannot, people, the amount of money they had didn't make any difference because it was the rich, the poor, it didn't matter. If you were breathing, the Black Plague killed you. It was that simple. Not everybody, but the massive majority. But the reason that things are going a little sour right now is this: mankind has this brilliant idea, and I've heard from people very close to me that this literally has been said, that people seem to think they are too wealthy to get ill. And therefore, the laws, the quarantines that are being put out, are not being put out in a unilateral fashion. They are not applying to everyone. And the fact that different states, different provinces, different cities, different communities are having different ways of dealing with the quarantine. It's not a question of whether or not people are aiming at the right thing. They're trying to do the best they can with what they've got. But here's the thing: picture, if you will, being on the Titanic. Okay, you're on the Titanic when the iceberg hits. And yeah, I remember it. I wasn't actually on the Titanic, but I do remember hearing about the horror stories. And I do know somebody today that was alive on that does have a past life memory of being on the Titanic. One of you maybe. Okay, I don't know. But what I do know is, if you visualize being on a major ocean liner, even in today's world, if you were to imagine being on the QE2, okay, out of England, which is simply the biggest ocean liner I know the name of. Picture being on that and something hits the side of it and punches a hole. Now you're trying to save everybody on the boat. So you're going to try and bail the water out. And that's great, except You don't have a bucket. All you've got is a strainer. Now, with a bucket, you might have a shot. Okay, a lot of buckets, really. But all you've got is strainers, colanders. Okay, basically a bucket with a whole pile of holes. And you're going to try and bail the water out. Now, in case you couldn't figure that out, give it a shot. Don't take my word for it. Trying to bail water out of a sink using a colander is not going to work well. But that is exactly what mankind is doing by turning around. I understand the issue. We can't lock everything down because if you lock everything down, society buckles. Now, the reality was when the Black Plague hit, we had this real brilliant idea. Everybody stayed away from everybody as best they could, so the social distancing did help. Covering their face with the mask didn't stop the virus, but it certainly slowed down its spread. But they did not they didn't separate people from the standpoint of, oh, you've got money, therefore you get more freedom to do what you will than other people. Okay, during the Black Death, everybody had the same problem. Now, they too knew that the world was going to run into trouble. But the thing was, they also knew they couldn't shut every door. So they dealt with the sick as best they could. And even at that point, what the king did, because he had been collecting taxes as well, and what he did was he just simply suspended taxes for a while so people had the money to live. He just didn't bother collecting the taxes, right? Because, well, part of it was the people that he had collecting the taxes were dying just as fast as the people that were supposed to be paying them. But the king never came out. Nobody ever came out and said, "Oh, the king won't get ill. The royalty won't get ill because they got more money than we do." Nobody even considered that. In today's world, that seems to be the point. Oh, if you've got money, if you've got a certain position in civilization, then you're good to go. Bad news. The virus doesn't know. Okay, and this is not to say the virus is not a dangerous thing. This is to say your bank account or who you call God or who you're sleeping with will not determine whether or not you get it. What they haven't told you yet, and I'm a firm believer in this, is that it's already airborne. Okay, and trying to build a vaccine for it is like trying to outrun Mother Nature. Now, don't get me wrong. If you want the vaccine, absolutely go and get it. But the reality behind it is this. With the methods that are being used right now, where you don't and I can only speak, I've only looked into Canada itself, talked to people from various provinces. Okay, there's a rumor on the internet, and I call it a rumor because I just talked to somebody the other day, just this morning. There's a rumor that in Ontario you're not even allowed to go to a grocery store unless you're double vaccinated. Well, that's a cute thought. But I spoke to somebody that lives in Ontario just this morning and double checked that. I don't take what the internet says for much. But when I talked to them, they said, no, we can go to grocery stores. We still have to wear a mask, but we can go to a grocery store with or without a vaccine. Okay. So be cautious of what you're reading on the internet. This is why I tell you, don't take my word, do your own research. But I'm not talking about research as in read what somebody else wrote. I mean talk to people you know. Okay, and get the inside scoop. Now, I will be shortly, probably today sometime, talking to somebody that I know in Alberta to double check them. Frankly, I don't know anybody that actually lives in Newfoundland. Contrary to popular belief, the fact that I'm in Canada does not mean I know everybody here. I actually got asked by somebody if I knew another person because they lived in Ontario, so I must know them because I'm in Canada. I'm like, okay, in Toronto alone, there's 3 million people. Kelowna, where I live, there's only about 120,000 in the trading area, from what I gather. Okay, I might be off on the numbers. I don't pay much attention to it. The point being, I don't know everything. But the thing I have discovered is people are taking a look at this whole COVID thing and going, we're only going to vaccinate, we're going to vaccinate people, but that has not even slowed it down by the reports. They're still talking about, people are still talking about the hospitals being overloaded. Okay, well, if 86% of the population is vaccinated, everybody in the hospital can't possibly be not vaccinated. Okay. I just heard tale of somebody when I was talking to the person in Ontario. I just heard tale that they know of a group that all got together. One person got in, was at the group that turned out to have COVID, and I think about 90% of the people that were there, okay, of the other people that were there, ended up 90. No, I think actually closer to 50. But anyway, the percent doesn't matter. This massive number of people that were there ended up with COVID as a side effect. COVID is a real illness. Okay, it's been around for a very long time. It was done, human greed and human stupidity is what triggered the problem. And yeah, that means people theoretically, a lot of humans. So some of those people may well be involved in the stupidest move that people can make, because the reality is that if it went the way that I've come to understand, where they took a known disease and tried making a biological weapon out of it that got away. Okay, war has never brought peace. War brings quiet, but it does not bring peace. It does not bring economic evolution. It doesn't do a whole lot of things that you're told it does. But we do know that because different provinces are not using the same protocols, different states are not using the same protocols. I'm even getting word now that there are small communities and cities that are going, we're just plain not enforcing the passport. Now, if you're dealing with that, it's like I said, you're trying to bail out a sinking ship with a colander, okay, or with a strainer. It doesn't keep the water in the bucket you're trying to move it out with. So you're going, it's the same idea as trying to empty a sewage bin, okay, a sewage bin, when you're still pouring sewage in the back end of it. You're not going to manage to do it anytime soon. Now, this said, okay, this is going to be an issue. Now, I've become far more reclusive than I ever was, and it looks like it's getting worse. Don't know what I'm going to do about that, or if I'm going to do something about that, but what I do know is that if we do not work together, then we are in trouble. And that means everybody, no matter what your income level, no matter what no matter the way you look at the world. Now, I returned to this world for this lifetime for one primary purpose, and that is to pass on one message, that working together, we can make this a better world for virtually everybody. Okay, now with that in mind, okay, it's very important that we understand, okay, very, very important that we understand that when you're dealing with things, okay, when you're dealing with this world, you have to take a look at it and go, okay, what am I doing? Am I actually helping the situation or am I causing a problem? Now, will I absolutely tell you I'm not vaccinated? Absolutely. Does that mean technically, if you want to go the fear that some people have, the government could show up on my doorstep and go, oh, you're not vaccinated. You have to come with us and get vaccinated. If that happens, certainly I'll go and do it. But as it stands, my ex-wife and both my kids are already vaccinated. So am I against people getting it? No. Am I against me getting it? You bet. But I barely leave the house. Okay. I was fortunate. I was taught how to order groceries online. So the only thing I really have to leave the house for is to go and get perishables. And if push comes to shove, and that does come the way of the line, where they say, "Oh, if you're not double vaccinated, you can't go into a grocery store," then fortunately, I do have the option at this point where I can take my son down to the grocery store, give him the money, and tell him go in and get what we need. And bearing in mind he's old enough, I can get away with that. Besides that, it wouldn't be a bad idea to teach him that. But that's the first part of it. So I figured I'd just put this in your head that, working together, we can make this a better world. But it's going to require everybody. And this whole issue of the way they're doing things, that things are being done in the way of you're not using a static pattern. And of course, people will say, freedom of choice. We've got the right to do this. We've got we've got free will. We don't have to do this. Technically correct. However, using the ship as an example, if a ship is sinking, you've got the right, whether you want to wear a life jacket or not. You absolutely do. Odds are, if you jump off a sinking boat without a life jacket, the odds are you're going to end up in the you're going to end up drowning. The consequences of your choices, you don't have options around. If you're in an aircraft, you have the option getting out of the aircraft while in flight, but if you get out of the aircraft while in flight and without a parachute, if you choose not to use a parachute, you can get out of the aircraft. I'll virtually guarantee, and it is possible. There's one guy that got around it that I know of. Okay, but if you get out of a plane and jump without a parachute, the odds are you're going to bounce pretty hard on the ground. And the fall won't kill you, but that sudden stop at the bottom is going to play havoc with your circulation. So we have to realize with the disorganized and completely disproportionate focus on what is required, even in travel. Okay, I mean, I get a kick out of it. I was talking to a trucker today, and they're talking about vaccine, about borders closing for between even provinces, and they're closed to everybody, period, except truckers. Well, that's a brilliant idea, but let's combine two things. Okay, and don't get me wrong, we've got to have the communication, we've got to have transportation between provinces, between states, between countries. It's got to be there. But if even one person is left able to cross a border, okay, if you don't have the borders open, society collapses, and guess what we get? Okay, I know you don't remember the Roman Empire when it fell, but I do. That was no fun. But if you've got one hole where the virus can get through, you can bet your bottom dollar it's going to find it. Because I'll tell you, the virus doesn't care how much money you make, doesn't care who you call God, okay, doesn't care what your home looks like, doesn't even care what you do for a living or who you sleep with. Fires are the same way. They don't care. And you'll notice the rain does not just fall on the poor people. So you have to look at that side of it. Now, with that in mind, when I say we have to pull together, okay, we've got to work towards this as a unified force. Now, when the Black Death hit, it was approximately 5 years. Okay, I think we're only going into the second year right now. But they're not even slowing it down, in my opinion. I mean, they'll give you numbers. Numbers, quite frankly, I've talked about this before, they don't count. I can prove, if you take a sample set out of a research paper, I can prove 100% of the time, using a sample group, that a coin, when you flip it, will land on its edge 100% of the time. And if you don't believe me, just ask. I mean, it boils down to this, really. But test it yourself. You flip a coin more often than not, if you flip a coin, it's going to land heads or tails, usually. But every once in a while, it'll end up leaned up against a wall or up against a salt shaker. Okay. And if you might flip it 1,000 times and only have it end up leaned up against a wall at an angle, a dozen times in 1,000 flips. Okay, or even a dozen times in 10,000 flips. But if you take that sample and you take, say, eight, you take a sample of 10, eight of which leaned up against the wall, and the other two landed one way or the other. All of a sudden, that funny little, 1 in 10,000 becomes, 8 in 10,000 becomes, you know, 8 in 10. It jumps from a staggeringly small number all the way to 80% of the time, that's where it'll land. And that's if you take a sample example, a sampling to figure out what happened. So, understanding that, we do have to pull together. Now, I do agree, especially with this being Christmas. And Christmas is, yes, people can call it an arbitrary time. I don't care what you call it. The reality I've seen, and this is just what I've seen, is that the majority of people do seem to try and be a little nicer to each other. So I've decided to do something very simple. Because I do agree with helping people, I do agree with charity, I do agree with the concept of tithing, as in 10% of your income, but going to the poor. Because the poor aren't always poor because they choose to be, or because they're drug addicts, or alcoholics. Okay, there's a group called the working poor. Those are the ones that are out there working and are paying their bills, but have nothing left over. So here's what I am personally going to do, and I've already committed this to myself. I've already told my son, my one son, that this is what I'm doing for next year. The way I'm working it out is this, and I do encourage you to do the same thing, and you'll find if a lot of people do this, it is so much more effective, okay, than if they don't. Okay, than if you go through charities. Don't get me wrong, charities are very important. They really are, and there's a lot of them out there that do some wonderful things. I know of people that have literally been kept off the street because of a charity, like a food bank. Okay, like a group that simply comes around and covers up some of the bills. But here's the problem that I have with them, and this is why I personally will not give to them. Okay, all charities, all nonprofit organizations, on the whole, okay, well, never mind on the whole, I've not heard of one that doesn't. Okay, a massive amount of the money that they generate gets eaten by administration costs. Okay, so the one group that like there is a secondhand store I drop a lot of stuff off at, and yes, they make money on it. Absolutely, it gets it out of my house, and I know from personal contacts that they do take a percentage of the money they make and give it to another charity called the Big Brothers. Okay, where they do actually give money to help the Big Brothers out. The reason I give to them is not because I give money. Money I won't give to anybody. Well, that's not entirely true, but I'll get to that in a second. But I take my stuff down to quite literally. I take it down to Value Village. You may not like Value Village. That's okay. It does what I need it to. It gets the stuff out of my house, and I know that they take money and turn it over to Big Brothers to help the families that have only one parent and they've got a child. Because here's the thing with children: they don't have to have the bloodline mother or bloodline father, but they do require a male role model and a female role model. Big Brothers and Big Sisters both cover those. They cover both of those aspects. But here's what I'm doing as far as money goes. Next year, okay, and I was going to start in January, but I'm going to calculate it out for this year for December because I want to make this happen in December of next year, which will make 12 months. What I'm doing is I know I've got a certain amount of money that I figured out that I require to run my household and continue building my life. So I'm not talking about taking away from your livelihood. I'm talking about surplus. Now, for me, what I've done is I've simply said, this is the income I've got. That's what I have to have. And anything over that limit, I will be taking 10% of that and putting it aside. And then come December of next year, right before Christmas, and I pick Christmas because it is simply a convenient, globally recognized time of year. Okay, makes it easy for me. So what I'm doing is I've got a place put aside where I'm going to take 10% of everything over that amount, put it in the same place, and then come the end of the year. Okay. And I haven't figured out where I'm going with this down the road, but to start with, this coming year, 2022, I'm going to be taking that money, however much I put together. Okay. And let's say, like last year, I think I made about $32,000. I think overall. This coming year, so based on a $30,000 income, if I take 10%, that means about $3,000 will get split between 12 people. And all I'm going to do is take a Christmas card, right? Just put the name of my band, like the Christmas card, Merry Christmas from my business name, signed by me. Okay, and here's a Christmas card, and hand it to strangers. I'm not going looking for these people as in who by name or who applies for it. This is going to be done very much on an instinctive level. Here you go. I'm not going to ask what their bank account looks like. I'm not going to ask what they require, but there are going to be, at the end of this year, I am taking 10% of what comes in and putting it aside. This is just part of the way I'm doing things. This is for me. Do I encourage yourself or your business to do the same thing? You bet your bottom dollar I do. Because I'll tell you, $10 to one person here, if you give $100 to most charities, I know of one in particular that only 1% of what goes to them actually goes to the charity. The rest goes to the people running it. I won't do that. Okay, so all of the money that I put together, and this is where you come in. If you choose to work with me on this, or to work with this and take this as an inspiration, okay, take 10% of your surplus, what is over what is required to run your house, to improve your own life. Take 10% of that over the course of the year. Okay. And at the end of the year, in December of 2022, I'm going to be taking whatever I've lumped together, split it into 10 envelopes, okay, into 10 Christmas cards, and walk around and hand it to people that I know, that I run into. Not people I know necessarily. It's, I'm just not working that way. Okay. And just give them a Christmas card, okay, with actual cash in it. Okay, hand it to them and walk off. Now, here's the other side of what I'm open to. Anybody that decides that they want to work with that kind of an idea. Now, yes, it does boil down to trust, because I'm not giving tax receipts to anybody. I'm not using this as a tax deduction. This is my money that I'm doing what I please. Okay, this is not a plea for extra money from anybody, because I'm not giving anybody tax receipts. I'm not even telling people, if I end up with people going, here, can you put this in the pot to help? Because I'm only going to be helping 12 people this year. That's just the way it's going to be. Okay. But I'm going to take that money and turn around and hand it over to, quite frankly, strangers. But if you think about that, if I'm looking at $3,000 for 12 people, we're looking at potentially, or $30,000, yeah, $3,000. So you're looking at a couple of $100 in all likelihood for a few people. It's only a few people. But if I do a few people and you do a few people and everybody else does a few people, all of a sudden we got a whole lot of people that are getting helped. Now, with that in mind, I bring this to a close here because we are at the half-hour mark. Okay. Until I will be back again tomorrow. Okay. But until then, take care of yourselves and each other. And for pity's sakes, stay positive.